This is a real good story about Bronx and his dad, Ryan, real United Airlines customers.
We were returning home, and one of the flight attendants asked Bronx if he wanted to see the flight deck and meet Captain Andrew.
I got to sit in the driver's seat.
I grew up in an aviation family, and seeing Bronx kind of reminded me of myself when I was that age.
That's Andrew, a real United pilot.
These small interactions can shape a kid's future.
It felt like I was the captain.
Allowing my son to see the flight deck will stick with us forever.
That's how good leads the way.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell you scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse wherever you stream podcasts. Just be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. I can hardly believe it, but it's already Halloween. Time just really seems to be flying these days. Halloween is one of my favorite days of the year. But of course, if you're like me, you don't really need a good reason to pull the blinds, watch scary movies, or listen to spooky story podcasts. Today's episode, the first I've released on Halloween since 2023, is a special one, because it may just be our longest episode yet. There's no central theme, and it covers everything from ghosts, to doppelgangers, to Ouija board nightmares, to UFO sightings, and more. And even better, these stories were submitted by faithful listeners of the show, including the hosts of some of the best spooky podcasts out there. So sit back, turn down the lights, pull up the covers, and pay close attention as I share the scariest true horror stories to keep you up at night. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Our first scary story was submitted by Chris, host of the Wandering Road podcast. Hello, my name is Chris, and I host a paranormal podcast called The Wandering Road. Just some quick background before I get into my paranormal experiences. I started this podcast as a kind of avenue to vent and discuss different topics, but then it slowly morphed into a space where my guests have shared their own paranormal experiences. Kind of a paranormal safe space. But enough of that. Let's jump into my stories. I grew up in the Bronx, New York City in the 90s, and I come from a mixed background. My dad is Indian, and my mother is from the Dominican Republic. My earliest paranormal encounter that I can remember was when I was between 5 and 6 years old. My sister was still a baby at the time, and I'm 5 years older than her. I remember waking up at around 2 or 3 a.m., looking over where the dresser and vanity was, and seeing these 5 or 6 shadowy figures that were not very tall in stature. They reminded me of the 7 dwarves. I remember sitting there looking at them, and then I started shouting at them. "Get out of here! You do not belong here! Get out!" My mother woke up, yelled at me in Spanish asking what I was doing, and told me to go back to sleep. I went back to sleep, and that was the end of that. Fast forward to 2023, and I'm down in Florida visiting my parents, and I asked my mother about that night and if she remembered me doing that. To which she replied, "Oh yeah, I remember you doing that. And it wasn't the first time you saw those things. There were multiple times that you cried and screamed that they were going to get you, and I would end up sleeping in your bed." So here I am thinking it was a one-off situation, but no, it happened multiple times. Not sure why I remember that specific incident, maybe because I was brave enough to confront them. I'm not sure what they were, but upon doing research, they definitely could have been duendes. Around 1999, my parents, aunt, and uncle came together to purchase a duplex home in Queens, New York. Having lived in apartment buildings my entire life, I was excited to move somewhere new. When we moved into the home, my aunt and her family occupied the downstairs, and we lived upstairs. This next story comes from my mom. Shortly after we moved into the home, my aunt came by from Manhattan to babysit my sister, who just turned 4 at the time. My mom went to work and came back later that afternoon. And upon returning home, my aunt says to my mother that, quote, "You have visitors in this home," end quote. My mom was confused and thought she meant someone had stopped by looking for her, to which my aunt reiterated that, "You have visitors in this home," implying there were spirits. I guess we could use this as a launching point for the other things we experienced. Shortly after we moved into the home, my cousin's radio in his living room would tend to just randomly turn itself on at full blast. This frequently occurred every afternoon, and to make matters worse, this would happen when no one would be home downstairs. There was an incident where my cousin was with me upstairs when it happened. His parents were at work, and so were mine. We went downstairs to check it out, turned it off, unplugged it, chalked it up to an electrical issue or faulty device, and went back upstairs to play a game or whatever. And wouldn't you know, the fucking thing turned back on again while it was unplugged. They eventually got a new stereo system that would still turn itself on randomly as well. Another strange thing that would happen literally every day is that I and others would hear heavy footsteps in the hallway and attic. It sounded like someone had boots on and they were stomping back and forth. When we brought this up to my parents, aunt, and uncle, they came up with the excuse that it was pigeons and squirrels in the attic making noise. But last I checked, squirrels and pigeons don't wear boots. But it was New York City, so who the hell knows? Then there was the knocking on our door 3 times. Thinking back to that experience and knowing what it signifies for Judeo-Christian belief is quite unsettling. For some reason, every night between 6 and 8 p.m., we would hear 3 knocks on our door. Me, being an 11-year-old kid at the time, did not think anything of it, and I would go answer the door thinking it was my cousin wanting to play PlayStation or something. I'd open the door, and yep, you guessed it, no one was there. To make sure no one was messing with me, I would go downstairs to check if anyone was home, and of course no one was. My uncle worked nights. My cousin was a teen at the time and was usually out with his friends. And my aunt would get home late from the city. Every time this happened, I would open the door and my dad would ask if anyone was there, to which I'd respond no. I guess he didn't believe me or something, because he decided to answer one time, and there was no one there at all. In true parent fashion, he just went back to watching the news. When it was time to sleep is when things would amplify. When we were in our rooms and my parents were sound asleep, we would hear footsteps walking from the living room to the dining room, to the kitchen, and back, all freaking night. My mother was a light sleeper, so there were times when the footsteps would wake her up, and she'd go into mama bear mode to make sure no one was intruding and trying to harm her kids. But nothing would be there. One night my mom heard the footsteps, got up to go investigate, but my dad heard the footsteps too and said he would go take a look. He went to the living room and saw no one, to which he then made an unwise decision and started swearing and yelling at whatever was there. I do recall that one night I woke up around 2 a.m. or so because I needed to pee. Now I always slept with my door shut, so I got out of bed, walked to my door, and as soon as I started to reach for the handle, I heard this low guttural growl, a sound I'd never heard before. I froze for a second, went back to my bed, and laid there till the sun came up. To give you an idea of what it sounded like, just think back to Beauty and the Beast when he roars at the wolves after fighting them off, but a little deeper. My cousin told me a similar story of him getting up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. He too had his door closed, and from the crack under his doorway, he could see this light moving back and forth from the bathroom door to the basement stairs, going back and forth all night. He too made the wise decision to stay in his room until sunrise. At this point, I want to say again that I come from a very mixed family. Some folks are Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, etc. There were a few times that prayer sessions were held in the home, but me being young didn't really understand the reason for them happening. But after looking back on them, I can now connect the dots. The adults, even though they tried to keep it together for us, realized there was something wrong. But for some reason, those sessions would have the opposite effect. Now this leads us to one of the experiences that is burnt into my brain that I will never forget. In my old house, to get to the bedrooms, you'd have to go through the kitchen and a small squarish hallway. If you're standing in the kitchen doorway to that hallway, walk to the center, and to the right is a closet door. To the left is a bathroom door, and straight ahead are the 2 doors to the bedrooms. My mother and I are standing in the kitchen doorway. My sister is standing in the entrance to one of the rooms, and my aunt is walking out of the other. My aunt walks out of the room, goes to the bathroom door, opens it, and then gets violently shoved out of the bathroom into the closet door, which was a good 7 feet or so away. Not only was she shoved, but she was a good foot off the ground when this happened. There was no wind, no draft or anything like that. To lighten the mood, my mother said the ghost had to use the bathroom, and she laughed it off. But to this day, I still don't understand why or how that happened, or how it was even physically possible. I spoke to my aunt a year ago, and decided to bring up the question, "Hey, do you remember when this happened?" She immediately said yes, she did, and we laughed it off. No longer living in that house, and being a bit older, I'm in my 30s now, I find that my family is now more open to speaking about the things that happened in that home. Here is where I'll pivot to one of my sister's tales. This one involves the oh-so-dreaded imaginary friend that little kids tend to have. This imaginary friend she had was named Andy, and he wore like a 1920s sailor suit. She would be all over the house playing with Andy. I remember there was one time my mom, sister, me, and my grandmother were getting ready to head to the store. We all left the house and started walking down the street, and while we were walking, my sister looked like she was holding someone's hand. When we got to the end of the street, my mother noticed that she was no longer doing that, to which she asked if Andy was coming with us. My sister then responded and said no, he isn't allowed to go past the street, and went back to the house. Harmless, right? Typical imaginary friend bullshit, right? So we all thought. Fast forward to August of 2004, and my grandfather had just passed away. The majority of my family was either on the first floor or outside in the backyard. It was about 10 p.m. My sister and my cousin decided they were going to go upstairs and get my sister's Barbies and Bratz dolls to play with. My sister said they went upstairs, and in the doorway of the kitchen, Andy was standing there with an angry look on his face, just staring at them. They had no clue why he was upset, but they didn't stick around to find out. They just screamed and ran back downstairs. Before I get into the story that I dub as my final straw, I will preface by saying that throughout my time living in that home, I would always hear the voice of my mother or father calling out my name, and you guessed it, there would be no one there. I remember on one occasion I heard my mom call out my name, but when I went to check, she wasn't out there. I proceeded to tell my mom about this, and she told me to never answer, that it was the dead calling out to you. There was one instance where I heard my mom calling my name, and naturally, I went to see what she needed. But to make it even worse, my mom heard it too. Now we go to my final straw story. It was in the fall of 2006, and I was in my last couple years of high school. During that time, I came home around 11 a.m. due to how schedules worked out for upperclassmen. I got home, and I found I was home alone, because my mom and dad were at work. Grandma was at the senior center, and no one was home downstairs. So I went to my room and played my Xbox 360. But while I'm playing my game, I heard what sounded like my mom calling my name. So I took my mother's advice, and I didn't answer or acknowledge it. It happened again, so I decided to call my mom. When she answered the phone, I could immediately tell she was outside. She worked in Manhattan, so you could hear the cars. She answered the phone and made sure that I was okay. I told her what happened, and she reiterated what she said before and said that she would be home in about 2 to 3 hours. So I hung up the phone and continued playing my game. I heard my name called again, but once again I ignored it. I guess whatever this thing was did not like that I was ignoring it. The door that connected our kitchen to the dining room slammed so hard with a loud boom that scared the shit out of me. Mind you, this was in November, so it was cold, no windows were open, and my parents put plastic over the windows, so there was nothing that could have slammed that door as hard as it did. Me being freaked out, I locked myself in my room until my mom got home. After that point, I told my parents I didn't want to live there anymore, so they bought a home, and we ended up moving out in February or March of the next year. This story is the last that happened to my family while living there, and this one happened to my mother. She is a devout Catholic, and she liked to pray and bless our home. Prior to moving out, she wanted to do that one final time. She had her incense burner and went to every room upstairs where we lived, prayed, and spread the incense. She goes downstairs to my aunt and uncle's place and obtains permission to do this down there as well. She would do this in every room. She goes to one specific bedroom downstairs, starts doing her cleansing and prayer. When she said the air started getting really thick to the point where she felt uncomfortable and that she was being choked and had to leave. This didn't happen in any other room in the house, only that one. Then that night, she said she dreamt of being in her room. The layout was the same, and it's as if she was still awake. In the doorway of her bedroom was an old lady with an angry look on her face that begins to scream at her saying, "You're trying to kick me out of my fucking house. This is my fucking house. If you try to kick me out, I am going to kill you and your family." My mom told me that in the dream, she grabbed this old lady by the neck and pinned her against the wall. She then threatened to kill the old lady. To make it even creepier, the old lady shapeshifted into a little girl pleading for mercy. Then my mom said she woke up and told me the next morning. Is this just a vivid dream or something paranormal or evil at play? I'm not so sure. These couple stories from that house happened in 2013 and 2022. In 2013, my aunt still lived in that house, and during that June, my sister graduated from high school. My aunt wanted to throw my sister a barbecue to celebrate. My sister and my cousin were at the barbecue, but they both had to go inside the house to get something. So they went through the front door and went through the hallway to take off their shoes. While my sister was looking down unlacing her shoes, she said that my cousin nudged her and said, "Do you see that?" She looked up, and they both saw this tall, dark mass standing in the hallway. They both ran out and never went back in, and shortly after that, my aunt sold the home. In 2022, my sister went to New York City to visit some family that still lived around the old neighborhood. For some reason, my sister and that same cousin decided to walk down our old block and decided to walk past our old house. As they were walking by, they both got sharp pains in their heads which didn't go away until they finally left the street. The final story I have happened while I was recording an episode with my cousin about her experiences in that house. So we're recording her episode. No one aside from me or her knows that this recording is happening. About 20 minutes into the recording, I got a phone call from my cousin that lives a few houses down and across the street from the old house I lived in. I declined the call. He then proceeds to text me, stating, "Guess where I'm parked in front of right now?" He then sends a selfie of him parked in front of that house. I proceed to tell him I'm recording an episode with our cousin about that house, and he jokes by saying the forces are at work. I screenshotted that particular interaction, and think back on it every now and then. Those are my stories. I welcome any of your followers to please debunk these stories if they can. I beg people to do so because I would rather have a scientific explanation for all of it than come to grips with the idea that I dealt with something evil or demonic. Our next story comes from Jess, co-host of the Weekly Bizarre podcast. My name is Jess from Weekly Bizarre podcast. Happy spooky season. I saw your post about sending in stories, and I have some alien stories for you. Sorry it's kind of long, but I hope you enjoy. When I was a little girl, around 3 or 4 I would say, my grandma had the routine of rocking me to sleep in her living room rocking chair before putting me to bed. My first memory of extraterrestrial life is burned into my brain like it happened yesterday. The thing is, I'm not even sure I knew what an alien was when it happened. This particular night, I must have dozed off and began to dream, or at least that is what my brain tells me. It was only a dream. In this so-called dream, the first thing I remember was looking out the window from my grandpa's lab and seeing 3 moons in the sky. I felt something calling to me from the other room, my grandmother's bedroom. I realized at that moment that the house was empty, dark and quiet. My grandma was gone, almost like I was in a different version of the scene I was in when I drifted off to sleep. I climbed out of the chair and began walking towards the bedroom, almost as if I had no choice but to do so. It was as if some invisible force was pulling me to it, but without uttering a word, a sound, or even a gesture. I continued into the room, and that is when I saw it. It just stood there, silently looking at me with its large dark eyes and tan scaly skin. It had feathers or tentacles or some sort of appendages growing from the back of its head, possibly horns, that I cannot recall exactly. I remember feeling utter dread. A fear that paralyzed me, took my voice so that I couldn't call for help, though I was trying to call for my grandma. When I felt I couldn't take much more, I woke up in the morning in my grandmother's bed. To this day, I would swear it was real, though my brain tries to tell me otherwise. It didn't feel like any dream I have had before or since. The second encounter was less personal, and I wasn't alone. I was about 16 years old, again at my grandmother's house, but outside this time. I had a friend staying with me, and we were out laying on the trampoline looking up at the stars and just talking about life as 2 teenage girls do, occasionally seeing some shooting stars and airplanes. It was easy to see the sky and the stars at night there. We were out in the country, so the light pollution was minimal. As we lay there, something caught both of our eyes at the same time. Off to the right, which would have been to the south of us, we saw a singular glowing orb moving steadily across the sky in our direction. At first, it could have easily passed as a plane in the night sky, but it seemed closer and brighter. We kept our eyes on it, and suddenly it stopped moving. It hovered in the same position, though only for a moment, before shooting back in the direction it came from 100 times faster than when it was drifting towards us. And just like that, it was gone, and we were sprinting towards the house, absolutely terrified. There was no doubt about what we had just seen being a UFO. No doubt at all. My third and final experience with the unexplained, I actually attempted to capture on film, though I was unsuccessful in doing so. Bummer. I was renting my aunt's house, which was right next door to good old Granny's house, where shit like this just seemed to happen on the regular. My son was around 3 years old, which would have made me around 25. I would sneak into the bathroom and smoke out of the window in there. The window was at the back of the house, which overlooked the forest, and also in the distance I could see my uncle's house and barn. I was puffing away at my cancer stick, when yet again, a strange light caught my eye. This time it was a central white glowing orb, with a technicolor orb on either side of the central orb. So 3 light orbs in total, if that makes sense. It was hovering in place over my uncle's barn for what felt like an eternity. When I realized it wasn't moving, I ran and got my piece of crap Razr flip phone to try and capture it on video. Needless to say, it just looked like a glowing blob on the phone footage. It was still there 3 minutes later, so I called my cousin to go outside and see it for herself so that there would at least be another witness. It was as if it knew what I was communicating, but like it wanted to be seen. It felt like it activated or something. She, my cousin, went out and saw it, and together on the phone we were both like, "What the hell is that?" It lingered there for a few more moments, silent, making no noise whatsoever, and then suddenly it was just gone, like it blinked out of existence, like it was never there. Our next story comes to us from Marin, a listener of the Red Treehouse. Hi Will, my name is Marin from Minnesota, and I'm a new listener. Your podcast was mentioned on another I listened to a couple weeks ago, and I had to check it out. I just finished the episode 67, Scary Games to Play in the Dark Volume 6, and when you talked about the Ray contest, I had flashbacks to when I tried this after being told it could help figure out if someone can see or sense ghosts. I've been told I'm an empath and have untapped clairaudient abilities. Anyways, I heard about the Ray contest a couple years ago on another podcast, and after trying it, the image I saw is still burned into my brain. Here it is if you are interested. This version doesn't start at your childhood home door, but walking down your childhood driveway and into the home. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, at the very end of a long cul-de-sac that sloped downhill, surrounded by woods, and I had 2 neighboring houses in that cul-de-sac, one on either side of my house, and we were separated by woods so that there was a lot of privacy. During the Ray contest, in my mind, I start walking down my gravel driveway taking in everything. The sound of my feet, the wind, no humans around, just birds chirping. And as I reach my front door, I turn around just to get a vision of everything from that angle. And as I look to the right of my driveway at the sparsely wooded area maybe 30 feet wide, in reality, between my house and the house next door, I include the word sparsely because in this spot, if my neighbor was standing there, I would be able to see them clearly. They would not be concealed by the forest. And in that wooded space stands a black figure. There were no features. It was hooded, a black silhouette just standing there facing me. I felt sick. Now my childhood home is so isolated that the joke was if some stranger came to hurt us, they'd have to call first for directions, or ask the pizza delivery guy, and I promise you, this was no pizza guy. I felt like I was in danger, so I immediately stopped the test that day. I tried again months later, but that image had me so freaked out, I gave up and decided to not ever try it again. Thanks for listening to my story about one time I had the guts to try something I heard on a podcast. And thank you for continuing to thoroughly creep me out and keep me awake at work. Can't wait to catch up on the episodes. I love your podcast. Our next few stories feature doppelgangers, scary dreams, an imaginary friend, ghostly hauntings, and an unsettling Ouija board nightmare. Story 1. I lived in a house that seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers. Every event that happened never involved some mysterious figure, but a known person being in a place where they should not have been. Here are a few examples. I was a teenager at the time, and I was instant messaging my girlfriend at the time with my webcam turned on. I had the viewer up so that I could see myself in the webcam. Behind me, there was stairs leading up, left of camera view, and the entrance to the living room, right of camera view. My younger sister would typically fall asleep every night on the couch in front of the TV and make her way up to the bed in the middle of the night. At one point in my webcam, I saw my sister leave the living room and go up the stairs. The thing that struck me as odd was that I didn't hear anything. It was an old Victorian house, so the wooden floor and stairs were loud as fuck. Without saying anything to my girlfriend, I got up and looked into the living room, and there was my sister passed out on the couch. I sat back down and asked my girlfriend if she had seen anything in the camera. She said, "Yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs." My family was all getting ready to go somewhere. I was sitting in the chair with my mom, and we were waiting on my sister, who was still in the house. After a bit, she comes out and gets in the car and just looks at me like, "What the fuck?" I ask her what's wrong, and she says that just before she walked out of the house, she thought I was still inside. So she yelled up the stairs, "We're leaving." And apparently, I yelled back, "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." My mom woke up to someone tapping her foot, and she said someone was standing at the end of her bed who faded out after a couple seconds. She said it looked like me. I had an encounter where I woke up and felt like someone was under my covers laying up against me. When I said something, my blanket visibly deflated, and I no longer felt anything at all. I include this as a doppelganger story because though I didn't see what I felt under the blanket, it laid like my girlfriend would have laid against me. My last story. When I was 22, I was in the military, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It still took like a year after the diagnosis to separate from the military, but I went home on leave for the holidays about a month after the diagnosis. Anyone that has insulin-dependent diabetes typically carries around some sort of kit. Mine is a black zipped-up pouch, and it has a glucometer, insulin pen, needles, and alcohol pads. Right after I left home to head back from leave, my mom texts me to ask if I'm missing my diabetic kit. I look and I'm not. She sends me a picture of a diabetic kit and asks if I know it. I've never seen this kit before in my life. Apparently my sister went into her bedroom and discovered it outside of her window, propped up like someone had set it there. Oh, also, her bedroom is on the second floor. Nobody else we know has diabetes. Our next story is an imaginary friend story. I'll begin by saying I'm personally more on the side of a skeptic when it comes to any paranormal experience, but enough things have happened in the last year to make me at least question that and entertain the possibility that this is legit and not just my daughter's active imagination. These events have occurred only in the house my husband and I bought in June of 2017, which was built in the 1920s. First, in October of 2017, I was laying my daughter down for bed, in the dark, with only moonlight lighting the bedroom. She pointed across the room and asked, "Mom, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something she could be referring to, but saw nothing. So I asked, "What guy, honey?" She responded that he was right there, and gestured towards the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked her what he was doing, in case I could piece together some recent episode of Pretend Play or a toy she commonly talked about. She said he was hiding. I asked if she was scared. She said, "No, he's hiding." Creepy. During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper, not scared. What made it strange was that she was 2 at the time and didn't really engage in pretend play or storytelling at that point. And as I mentioned, there were no toys in sight. From there, we just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named That Guy. This is the umbrella name we generally use for any other episodes or weird stuff that happens around the house. That guy is pulling a prank. Next, in January or February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed along with her then 6-month-old brother. We were doing the usual cuddle-up night-night talk when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed. Just me and you, and him and her." My skeptic mind would argue that him could have easily been her little bro, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely ever mentioned him. and he wasn't included in any of her talk that we were just having. What really was strange was her. Who's her? The only other female in the house is our cat, and she wasn't in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in bed with us, and none were in the near vicinity of her bed that she could have been talking about. A little later that spring, a new name came into conversation: Mr. Longneck. Short backstory: my daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's when she's playing. We can't really explain it other than kids do weird stuff sometimes, and it started before we moved into this house. Anyway, she was getting put down for a nap and was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck-grabbing thing and suddenly did it a little tougher than usual, but not enough to hurt, and said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck, Mr. Longneck." I had never heard her use this name, and it isn't a character in any YouTube or Netflix show she watches. So I asked who Mr. Longneck was. She just kind of giggled it off and was asleep 10 minutes later. This was when I started getting creeped out a bit by her stories. In April of 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents, and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There had been a fire in our home in 2009, which we knew about and in which no one was hurt. During the renovation after the fire, the owners at the time found a bunch of old stuff in the walls and included it with some pictures of the fire and a couple newspaper clippings. Among the old stuff was a pack of pearl buttons, some store catalogs from the 1940s, and a small notebook with some handwritten names inside. I presume these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names inside, as well as the home. After all this, my husband and I are suspicious that if there is something paranormal going on, maybe these objects are keeping some energy here or something. I know this is long, but we're almost done here. In about October 2018, I was driving to my mother's house with only my son and daughter in the car. Along the way, my daughter, now 3, asked from the back seat, "Mom, is that Grandpa?" I said, "Where?" She pointed to the empty front seat and said, "Right there." I told her Grandpa was at home, as he had just recently moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street or sidewalks for her to point at either. Now, there have been other minor events that have happened, but these were the biggest ones to describe in detail. While we have encouraged our daughter to talk about it, I've never pushed it, in order to avoid leading the conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would just offer to appease the conversation. One day, though, and a few times after, I just decided to ask her about it. Below is a brief detail of what she has said in roughly the past month. "Can you tell me about that guy?" "What guy?" "You don't remember that guy?" "No." "What about Mr. Longneck?" "Oh, yeah." Face lights up. "Can you tell me about him?" And various other questions lead to, Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears a monster clothes and hat. He is nice, but also scary. He says trick or treat, but doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away, and goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs. She says he comes to our house at nap time, which she no longer has but was generally the afternoon. He knocks on our big door, the patio door, and walks through the kitchen. These were her exact words, and while she was telling me this, she was pointing at a path from the door to one of our living room windows. I asked what he says or does, and among a few things, she mentioned he played in the kitchen with her, with the spinny cow toy. This is one of those Fisher-Price pull-string farm toys. She never plays with it. I rarely see it, and have never seen it in the kitchen. The specific details of this piqued my interest for sure. I also asked if he ever brought a friend, to see if I could follow up on the her mentioned earlier. He brings a friend. She is a little girl, not a grown-up, and has yellow hair like me. She is never scared of these talks, although she withdraws from the conversation when I ask about his neck, and why it is long. Our next story involves a scary dream. When I was pregnant with my second child, I would have insanely vivid dreams, usually just random things. But one night I dreamed about what I'd come to know as the Hat Man. I'll give a little background for context in the dream. My friend Anna recently moved to a different home, and her friend Charlotte moved into the old one. Me and Charlotte were only acquaintances, but since Anna had lived in the home, I was very familiar with it. In my dream, I was walking up to the house with my husband and my oldest daughter. I was coming to babysit for Charlotte. It was super foggy and dark with no other houses around it. Nothing but a man sitting outside of the fence. He had his back turned to us, just staring at the house as he sat in a wheelchair. The feeling I had was extremely uneasy, and something about the man was just off. As we approached, I got the sense that this man wanted to get into the house but couldn't. He appeared to be middle-aged. Nothing stood out besides the wheelchair. And his hat. It was a hat you'd see in a show like Peaky Blinders. The closer I got, the more I somehow knew that this was not a good person. In fact, he was not a person at all, but something pretending to be one, and the wheelchair was only a guise for him to seem like he was not of any threat. Don't ask me how I knew all this. It's just dream logic, I guess. I said to my husband as we came up beside him, almost passing the entrance to the gate, "Don't look at him. Don't talk to him." For whatever reason, I looked at his face then, and he started to change. I can't really describe what he became, but as it grew and morphed, I could sense his anger fuming as he became this distorted, towering thing. We quickly pushed past him and into the house. He had disappeared. When I got into the house, nothing was right. It was abandoned and dilapidated, save for a worn kitchen table with 3 little girls, all in the same onesie. I could see 2 were twins, and 1 was slightly older. Now Charlotte only has 1 son and a toddler girl, and I have never babysat for her or met her children. I told Anna about the dream a few days later. I always tell people my dreams. I think they're entertaining and weird, and I'm sure anyone who has had the misfortune of hearing about them probably just thinks the latter. She agreed it was a weird dream, and said Charlotte had been talking about her son complaining of a ghost or something in his closet at night scaring him. She told Charlotte about my dream, and shortly after she reached out to me privately, and what she said sent shivers down my spine. Before her daughter was born, she had a miscarriage. Twins. And her son had been intermittently telling her about some ghost that came out of his closet at night with a weird hat on. She also said she had been extremely depressed and feeling very off lately. Charlotte asked if I had ever heard of the Hat Man, but I never had. And just as well, the hat in my dream wasn't the same type as the one her son described when he talked about the thing that was in his room at night. I told her all the details in my dream, and we ended our convo agreeing it was very strange. I didn't talk to her again after that. Honestly, I had forgotten about all of it since I was so busy with a toddler and would be giving birth soon. My pregnancy was hard and postpartum was harder. I immediately had severe PPD, and honestly my brain went to some scary places during that time. I don't want to get into that part much, but I'm really lucky to still be here now writing this. One day, a few months after I had my second daughter, I lay down on the couch to sleep while the baby sleeps. I was in some weird half-dream, half-awake state when I heard and felt someone come to the edge of the couch, standing behind where my head was. I got the feeling it was a man, and he was frightened. Just as fast as he appeared, he disappeared, and someone, rather something, was left standing behind him. The sense of dread I felt through my entire body was so intense. I felt heat burning through my body just before I jerked awake. As I opened my eyes, jolted upright and turning to face what was behind me, I caught a strange glimpse. It was something like a fleeting shadow, just a black outline / shadow type thing. A tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Then in a blink he vanished, What the hell did I just see? What the hell just happened? I don't even know why I said anything. It just came out of me. Why? And in a quiet, retreating voice that was not my own, but unmistakably a man's, I hear, "Because you invited me in." After the initial shock and questioning my sanity, I realized that whatever that thing was, it was the very same energy I had felt from the man in a wheelchair in my dream months before. I'm not one to believe in shit like this, and quite honestly, it was the last thing I was thinking about since I was so busy and tired from the C-section and adjusting to a new baby. I googled the description of what I saw and scrolled through the images. There it was, the dark silhouette wearing the same hat with the caption, "The Hat Man." I read so many articles trying to piece together this strange experience that made no logical sense.
We all love a legendary comeback, and Degree Original Cool Rush is back and better than ever. Cool Rush isn't just a scent, it's a movement, a fan favorite that delivers bold, fresh vibes and all-day sweat protection. Whether you have a man that spends hours in the gym, heads into the office early, or is just trying to stay fresh on a long day, Cool Rush has their back. Head to your local Walmart or Target and grab Degree Cool Rush, the fan favorite scent from the world's #1 antiperspirant brand.
Our next few stories detail ghostly hauntings. Story 1. One semester, I lived in a single dorm, in a building that has been there for 100 years now, and that many a nun has passed away in. My dorm was right next to the stairwell, and I always had an eerie feeling in that room from the day I moved in, and even had my friend stay over a couple times because I couldn't get the feeling to go away. And she said she felt the same way, despite me never telling her the reason why I had her stay over. She never felt this way in her room, which was only 3 doors down from me. Every night at 2 a.m., I would hear footsteps above me, sounding like someone was walking on tile in stilettos. Except the floor above me was carpeted, so it would not have sounded like that at all. And then I would hear them either walking up or down the stairs. Again, this was between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. on weekday nights, times in which no student would be going out. I would also hear a rubbing sound on my walls, but the way my room was positioned, there was no room adjacent to me, and nobody was in the stairwell doing that. My lamp would always make a clicking sound right when I was about to drift off to sleep, as if someone was turning the knob the opposite way, because the light never turned on. So many weird things happened in my dorm over the past 2 years, and my school is known to be haunted. I freaking hate it. My freshman year roommate and I heard and saw the same things, so it definitely wasn't hallucinations. We'd shut off the light, get in bed, be half asleep, and all of a sudden, shit would fall off the shelves and onto the tile floor for no reason at all. Like there was no way this stuff could have fallen or should have fallen. At first, we'd freak out and turn on the light and put it back. But as the semester got on, we just started ignoring it as it became expected every night. We would hear it, acknowledge it, laugh, then each fall asleep. In the morning, there would be nothing on the floor. Whenever she was gone, I would always hear a girly voice whispering in the corner. Impossible, because our neighbors would never be around when I was there. The floor below me was a bunch of guys, and we lived on the top floor. My laptop got thrown off my desk at one point when I was in the bathroom, and it should not have fallen off. I was also the only one home that night, and my door had been locked. The bathroom was another story. The second stall was always locked, with a sign on it that said out of order. My roommate and I went to the bathroom at the same time one afternoon. I was in the first stall, her in the third, with the broken one between us. Normally she is a slow pisser, but that day she was in and out so fast. I was taking my time. There was one sink, so she was washing her hands when I came out, with a strange look on her face that I was oblivious to. I looked at her and was like, let's see if this bitch-ass ghost wants to come out. so I turned and knocked on the broken stall like 5 times. She was like, "Oh my fucking God, no, please stop," and looked terrified. I asked what was wrong, and she pointed to the mirror. There was a reflection of bare, dirty feet under the broken stall. I screamed shit and we ran the fuck out of there. She had seen it from the second we walked in there. I've asked upperclassmen who lived on that floor previously, and they have all seen it too. Even the freshmen during my sophomore year brought it up to me as well. I still refuse to use that bathroom when I'm in that building. We'd also hear mumbling from a corner of the bathroom at 3 a.m. when there was nobody else in there. Multiple people have reported it. My God, I hate that dorm. Story 2. My childhood home was definitely haunted. I have a drawing potentially made by a ghost. To start, I can feel when there's a presence somewhere. There's a palpable sense of being watched. There's a tension and paranoia in the air that lingers and can even simmer into full-blown terror. It makes you feel very vulnerable. When I was a younger child, I remember seeing glowing red eyes hanging in the air in my dark living room. I thought our house had werewolves or vampires. There was a phase in 3rd grade when glowing orbs would hang out in my room for several minutes at a time, which I interpreted as aliens. My child mind was trying to make sense of things, but I definitely had a fear of the dark, specifically in our house. Most places were fine in the dark, but in our house, I always felt like I was being watched by something with malicious, or at best, neutral intentions. Paranormal things ramped up for me in high school, but to remain chronological, I had a cousin stay at our house one summer while most of us were on vacation between my 7th and 8th grade years. My cousin Billy was helping my dad with various projects. One night, he was going to bed in one bedroom, later dubbed the spooky room. Outside in the dark, he saw a figure leave our garage and enter our house. My dad, right? "Billy, Billy, Billy, help me!" My cousin heard my father shouting. Billy rushed to check on my dad, except he was sleeping and was irritated by Billy's presence. Billy went back to bed, only to hear it again. "Billy, Billy, Billy, help, help, help!" Again, cousin Billy rushed to check on my father, who was fine and confused by Billy's urgency. Billy slept on the couch that night. I didn't learn about this until years later. A couple years later, my brother moves away to college, and I move into his old bedroom, the spooky room. It's my freshman year of high school. I was always particularly creeped out by this room, but hey, new changes are often intimidating. One morning, I wake up to see a skull perfectly drawn on the dust on the window across from where my head lies when I sleep. This was the layer of dust facing the inside of the room, not the outside. No one had access to the room except me and my parents, who are not pranksters by any means. I show my mom and wipe it away. A couple weeks later, I'm studying in that bedroom. It's night and the lights are on, so the windows turn into mirrors. I look up from my bed towards that skull window, and I see in the reflection a white silhouette standing behind me. I hold my gaze for maybe 10 seconds, just trying to grasp what I'm looking at. I eventually turn my head around and see nothing. I look back at the window and see nothing in the reflection. I sleep on the couch for the next few nights. A couple more weeks later, I'm lying in bed, listening to a late-night radio show. The lights are off, and I'm looking through that same skull window when I see a similar white silhouette stride past my window. I sleep on the couch for several more nights. Over the course of a few weeks, I see more things drawn on the dust of the windows. Generally, it's scribbles and shapes. I'm scared they might be a curse or something, so I wipe them away. Out of curiosity, I put a sticky note on the window that says, "Please write below." Several days later, a perfect circle appears around the note. as if someone had put the base of a paint can up against the surface. This wasn't like the finger drawings I'd seen earlier, but one drawing did really stand out. I decided to recreate it in Microsoft Paint before I wiped it away. Over the years, I've shared this with friends and colleagues, and they mostly come to the same conclusion I did before I tell them my interpretation. But yeah, for the majority of high school, I slept with the light on. I avoided that side of the house like the plague. Little things here and there, but nothing huge. Until it's senior year of high school, and I'm in the living room with my mother watching TV, and the clothes dryer finishes. This dryer is directly down the hallway from the spooky room. I suck it up and head over to empty the machine, getting my usual feeling of immense dread and paranoia as I enter that side of the house. I bent over and start unloading the laundry, and my mind goes blank, and I lose control over my motor functions. My arms go limp, and beyond my control, my body stands up, and I hear a masculine voice take a deep breath and hiss in my ear. I immediately regain control of my body, and I got the fuck out of there. Around that time period, my aunt comes to stay with us for a month or two. She has no idea what I've experienced there. But literally on her first day there, the bathroom door slams hard on her, and she immediately has us smudge the house to ward off whatever's there. I've experienced other paranormal things elsewhere, and I've had a couple weird experiences where I think my dead relative warned me about a couple imminent deaths in my family. But that's a story for another day. Our last story comes to us from Catherine, co-host of the terrific I Scream, You Scream podcasts, and it involves a haunted bar. There is a haunted cigar bar in Milwaukee that was built on top of an old gravesite. They do regular haunted history tours and paranormal investigations. I decided to take the tour one night while a friend was in town, and we eventually ended up in the basement. We were standing in a hallway that was lined with storage shelves and led from the front of the basement to the larger storage area in the back. The tour guide was standing on one side of the hallway, and we were all facing him. My friend and I standing all the way to the right, so no one was on that side of me. At one point, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow start to move at the very far end of the hall, where the larger storage area was. I was a little freaked out at first, but then I realized that it wasn't a shadow, but an actual man walking down the hallway toward us. He had on a red shirt and black pants and seemed like he was in a hurry, but also hesitant to disrupt the group. I could feel the floor shake as he took each step in his heavy boots. I felt ridiculous for being so scared, thinking he was a ghost at first since it was clearly just some guy, probably looking for more supplies because it was a busy night at a popular bar. I started to move to get out of his way so he could pass by us. I turned toward him to acknowledge him and say hello so he wouldn't feel like he was interrupting. But when I turned, no one was there. I turned to look back at the tour guide, who had stopped talking and was looking in the same direction down the hallway. He looked back at me and simply said, "Yep, I saw him too." What did you think of these unsettling and frightening true horror stories? Comment or email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to each person and show host who sent in their stories. You can find their social media handles in the show notes. Be sure to follow. As we turn down the lights on this episode, make plans to join me next time as we continue exploring our strange and scary world. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.
you